There we go. So, hello and welcome to our conversation circle today, the 3rd of July, for the African Collaboration Network for Design Thinking. Welcome. We'll be recording this, so it'll be shared later. And we're excited to have everyone here. People can join as they come. And yeah, there's just a few guidelines today to allow yourself to be fully present. And hello to Zviko from Play Africa in Johannesburg. Nice to have you here. Yeah, allow yourself to just be fully present and show up for this hour by turning off other distractions if you can. Nyla Conrad will be moderating for us today. So if I can introduce Nyla. Nyla is a coach and D School at the D School Africa, and she previously was a convener for the UCT Health Science faculty's MPhil program in health innovation. She has a PhD in medical biochemistry and then uses design thinking for helping multidisciplinary teams come up with solutions, and has done so in the healthcare space a lot and works with a lot of D Schools programs. And recently was the moderator for a design dialogue that we hosted at the D School. Is that right, Nyla?
Yeah.
Yeah, so thank you so much for moderating today. That Design Dialogues was a great event. Well done to Janice and the team and everyone involved there. So that's available on the Hasso Plattner D School Africa YouTube channel if you'd like to have a look. And then, yeah, let me hand over to Nyla. So she's moderating, very interested in the topic of community engagement as well. So perfectly placed to host this conversation with Larrissa Bacchia today. Thanks, Nyla.
Thanks, Jenny. Yeah, I'm very excited to be here today. So I'll be moderating today. I'd like to introduce you to our speaker for today, who is Larrissa Bacchia, who works for IDEO.org in the Nairobi office, which is located in Kenya. And she'll be telling us about her experience implementing human-centered design projects through a community engagement lens. Larrissa, welcome. Can you please tell us a little bit more about yourself and what it's like working at IDEO.org, a little bit about your experiences. Over to you, Larrissa.
Sure. Thank you, Naila. Hi, everyone. My name is Larrissa Bacchia, and I'm a Director of Programs and Partnerships at IDEO.org. I work at our Nairobi studio, and I've been working for IDEO.org for the past 5 years. And that is when I transitioned from a 14-year career from advertising, the private sector, and transitioned into social impact and development. So it's been quite a ride. I've been on a very steep learning curve. Learning a completely new language, learning a new way of designing and engaging with end users. And what I would say, what has been really cool about working with IDEO is the team of multidisciplinary users and designers and researchers and storytellers that we work with when we're developing products and services. There's always something new that you learn, and it's through this multidisciplinary approach that we have been able to change and revolutionize the system of human-centered design. As you all know, it started from the global north, and now that it's been adapted in the global south, we have seen the need of taking into account our deeply entrenched traditions and cultures to be able to design for the communities that we serve. So, for example, when we're working with multi-sectoral partners, in this case, if you're working with an NGO or a government body, policy and advocacy experts, sometimes those could be your pool of users. And in that case, you have to design for all their past the touch points of experiences, right? And that's the reason why I think conversations like the one that we are having today is so important, because even though we have the outlined methodology of human-centered design thinking, it has been adapted by various organizations to suit their type of work. But what I really love and that continues to inspire me in the work that we do at IDEO.org is the way that we have now begun to consciously and intentionally center communities in the work that we do. So we really value lived experiences. We actually see an individual's lived experience as their expertise, and that comes out when we're co-designing solutions with end users. We also work on initiatives where we catalyze collective action, and most of the time this is with larger organizations or government offices. We really try to make the future tangible because we really are driven by the whole idea of creating what should exist and a future that we would like to see for our families, for ourselves, for our children's children. So being able to design in the long run and being able to diversify our own methodology, incorporate the cultural nuances and the needs of our communities across the continents is something that drives our work now from our Nairobi studio.
Thank you very much, Larrissa. That is, I think, I see a lot of the D School colleagues on the call, and I think we can all agree, and we really know what you're talking about, because we are finding the more we delve into South African-based projects that is entrenched in the community, we're finding ourselves having to adapt on the go as well. And it's also a learning curve for us about working with communities. But I think that's why we are all very interested to have you reflecting on your years of experience so that we can hopefully learn from that. So before we get into Larissa's presentation, so how we're going to be doing this is Larissa's going to break up her talk into two parts. So she's first going to talk about the community playbook. We're going to pause, and then we're going to have a round of questions. Then she's going to move into talking about the case studies that she's been a part of, and then hopefully we'll have a longer bulk of time to do a more intensive question and answers towards the end. But during her presentation, please feel free to keep the questions coming through the chat, and I'll be monitoring that. So just so that everyone knows where the chat is, can you tell us your name and which country or city you're from? And can you please write that in the chat, please? And go. So let's see where everyone's from. That's hello.
I can see my colleague has also joined the call, Luan.
Okay.
Hi there. That's right. And there's actually Alice and Celeste are here as well.
Oh,
so
hi,
we are just listening in because Larrissa, but yeah, happy to support in any way.
Great. So we've got all the D School people from Cape Town, South Africa. Jenny is out in Swellendam. Colin, which city are you in? But you see Gordon from Ghana, welcome. Sebastian's in Frankfurt, welcome. And then our Nairobi team, great. Colin's in Joburg, fantastic. So now everyone knows where the chat function is. And then towards the end, we'll use raising your hand. But just while Larissa's talking, we'll be using the chat function. Fantastic. Let's just see what else is here. Zviko's from Joburg. Great. Larrissa, I'm going to be handing over to you. Let's get started.
Great. Let me share my screen. Okay. So today I'll be taking you through the recently launched Community Engagement Playbook. There are some sections that I'm going to miss in the interest of time. So we're going to look at what we define as community engagement within our design process. We're also going to look at how it plays into I would say, the original methodology of the HCD process. I'm going to skip the community engagement principles. It's a really dense section. And I think Jenny is going to be sharing the link with all of you, so you'll be able to read through it later. Then we're going to go through the archetypes of the different collaborators that you would meet in your community. and then we look at the example so we can see exactly how the process comes into play and exactly what sort of collaborators sometimes you would expect to meet in the communities that you're designing for. So when we think about a community, we have to define it for what it is. And in whatever design brief that we are looking at, it refers to the group of people who share common values, goals, beliefs, interests, and are interconnected through relationships, shared experiences, and a sense of belonging. And once you identify these communities, it could be like a group of people who live in one place. It might be community health workers who are responsible for delivering a health product or service to the community. It could be a chief who's, looking to expand like the human rights work that a lot of these community workers do. So communities are often defined by the design brief that you're going to be looking at. So we have noticed a few characteristics that embody what community engagement looks like: collaboration, understanding, inclusivity, relationships, and sharing power. Now, these characteristics, the same as the principles, they're not prescriptive, because you will find that sometimes some will come up a lot more. There's some communities you'll need to collaborate a lot more with. There are others that actually need more inclusivity. And also there are others that you might need to share power. And there's always a mix and match of how you find these characteristics at play in the communities that we work. So when we talk about collaboration, this is intentionally involving and collaborating with the community members that seek to promote agency and connection. And they're the ones who ultimately strengthen the design process and the shared solution. This process is usually really, really important, and especially to do at the beginning of design research phase or the inspiration phase, because you need sometimes to get the buy-in through this collaboration of whatever work it is that you're going to be doing in the community. Whether it's design research or implementing a solution, the collaboration is really, really important to start off with. Then we've got understanding. You have to be aware of the community members' needs, as well as their habits, customs, and norms. So going into a community, let's say going into a rural community, and you're from an urban area, you have to think about some things that would affect the way they perceive you and the way that they are going to welcome you. So your state of dress, or who it is that you're speaking to first, and the recognition that you're giving to some of the like generational dynamics that they have within communities. So some communities, it's important that you acknowledge children in the room. Some communities, they just want you to speak to the men, and others want you to speak to a different type of person. When it comes to inclusivity, you need to be able to include and value the diverse members of a community that you're working with, because everybody comes in with their own perspectives, and they also have a way that they can add really rich insights into your process. So you have to give them the opportunity for the participation within the design process. And we'll look at some of these cases, how they come into play in the case studies. Then there's relationships. As designers, we have learned the importance of building relationships with trusted influencers. So especially like local administration, religious institutions, and CBOs. And because we have to keep going back into some of these communities, because we are working, let's say we have a project on health, and then the next time you go into the community, you're working on a financial inclusion project. The next time you go to the community, it's agricultural. So sometimes these people act as the gatekeepers of the community. And because you also want to get ahead of NGO fatigue, you have to be able to be directed to the right people that you need to be speaking to. And then there's sharing power. This is something that has been spoken about for, I think for the last 3 years, I would say. We have seen a lot of design firms, and multinational NGOs, and even government bodies who have come in with a phrase of sharing power, because we have to be able to meaningfully engage with the users that we are designing for. And the solutions that we create have to be inclusive and sustainable for the longer term. And when you share power, that is when now you create the opportunities for having solutions that are actually community driven. Okay, and that helps in spurring them forward. That helps in them being sustainable, even when funding sometimes is not does not continue. So when we look at the difference between community engagement, co-design, community design, we start small. So when we're talking about community design, we are designing for the conditions, the spaces, and the structures that usually bring people together in service of the shared goals that add value to their lives. And you have to keep this in mind. And then when we talk about co-design, it is a collaborative design method. And this is where we bring in the communities that we're designing for and with, for them to actually shape the decisions about the future services, programs, or systems that will directly impact them. And when we talk about community engagement, it now brings in the interaction of a design team with the people from a particular community. And we seek to achieve sustainable outcomes by practicing equitable decision-making processes. So you find that sometimes you might end up thinking that just because you've co-designed something with the end user, you wonder why your intervention is not moving forward. And oftentimes it's because you either start too soon in the process and you haven't actually involved everybody who needs to be to have buy-in into that particular solution, hence community engagement encompassing all these processes. So when we look at the process, it starts with building trust. We've talked about being able to collaborate, being inclusive, building your relationships, and being able to share power. So we have to be able to build trust with the communities that we're designing with, so then we can be able to get the best insights that we would need. So when we talk about the HCD innovation process, I think all of you have seen this diagram at one point or the other. Everybody has seen this diagram, right? So we go through the inspiration phases, the ideation phase, and then the implementation phase. And HCD is a process that, starts with people. We need to understand their pain points and their aspirations, and it ends in solutions that feel truly resonant to the communities they are meant to serve. So what we're going to do is look through all these phases and how community engagement comes to play. So we haven't done away with this methodology. The only thing that we have done is that we've disrupted it in a way to include community engagement, but the basic principle of human-centered design thinking remains the same. So community engagement elevates the voices of the people that we are serving. So when it comes to the inspiration phase, we ground ourselves in the needs and goals of the communities we work with, and then seek creative ways to solve for these challenges. Now, before, what we would do in the inspiration phase, we would look for the analogous inspiration and then go to the community to either approve or disapprove something, right? To help us go into the ideation phase. The next is when you go into the ideation phase, we generate new ideas and test them in context by creating tangible prototypes and running experiments, and we quickly learn and improve on these concepts. In some instances, when it comes to the ideation phase, when we talk about co-design and community engagement, we actually bring in the end users to help with the ideation process, so we can actually create early buy-in. And then there's implementation, where we build partnerships with a network of stakeholders who would be responsible to either pilot or scale up this ideas. Okay, so during inspiration, like I said, we need to understand the community you want to design for as a crucial first step. So it involves engaging the people through observation interviews and participating in their daily activities, because we need to be able to dive in and get to the nuances of what it is we're designing for, what are the barriers that we're going to meet, right? And it just ensures that the solutions that come up from the next phase are truly relevant and beneficial to the community. So the moments that matter in the inspiration phase, there's a planning, and then there's a community entry. These considerations here are just like guiding questions that you can ask yourselves when you're going into the community. So it's important that we that we understand how we're going to draw out the needs and perspectives of the community. We need to be able to identify the key stakeholders who we need to be speaking to and the relationships that will need to be established. Remember, like I was saying, when it comes to the relationship building, sometimes you've got the community gatekeepers. And when you have the community gatekeepers, you need to be able to identify them early on, because what we found out is when you skip to community entry and then have to go back to this phase where you need to identify stakeholders and get permission to go into the community, you will often just come against a roadblock. And then when now we've done the planning phase, we've identified who we need to speak to, we know what needs and perspectives we need to understand from this community and the resources that we need to go with. When it comes to community entry, we ask ourselves, these are the considerations that we usually go in with, right? So we need to familiarize ourselves with the community's culture, history, and norms. And it's really important to have some of this at the back of your mind and not give the extra labor to the community you're going in to actually do the work for you and educate you, okay? And then we need to be able to effectively communicate the project's purpose and its impact for them. Why should they be listening to you? Why do they need to work with you? And then thereafter, just continue building the positive relationships. So another moment that matters is the recruitment of participants. It's important that you get like the right mix, the right flavor of people who are going to give you the insights that you actually need to work with. So when we're talking about recruitment, there's some times where you can bring the participants to you, and there's some instances where you need to go to their homes or you need to go to their place of work. Or if they're having like a community meeting, you need to go and ask for permission for that. So we need to work with them and actually be inclusive in how they access us and how we access them. We need to think about compensation. That is something that is universal across Kenya. I don't know if it's the same for you in South Africa, but there are other markets that we have worked with across SSA, and we have found that compensation is a must. And there's usually like a ceiling of how much money that you can pay to participants. And then there's the interviews and the focus groups. We need to recognize and respect the community dynamics. We need to think about the literacy levels. So in some instances, we might have discussion guides and it's a question and answer session. Some other times it's an observation. Sometimes it could be an art and craft activity. It depends on what your objectives are for learning, but you also do not limit how you're going to interview that particular individual based on their level of literacy, because then you're not being inclusive. So when it comes to ideation, we use the insights we gather from the community to come up with new ideas. So we often hold workshops and meetings where everyone can share their thoughts and help make the early designs better. So the moments that matter here are identifying the solutions that we need to design for. The considerations, these are things that you can ask yourselves, you can add to this list. Then there's co-creating the solutions. It's important that this is a very important consideration, noting whether you've removed potential barriers for participation and whether you've created an inclusive environment for co-creation. So the same principles apply as during the inspiration phase when you're conducting the interviews and the focus group discussions. When you're ideating, you also have to enable them to be able to communicate what their vision is for themselves or this particular intervention that you were trying to design. And then prototyping and testing is important, and you need to ensure cultural sensitivity during this time. So I think health is the biggest topic when it comes to cultural sensitivity. So if you're running a prototype and a test in a community of adolescent girls and young women, right? And you want to enable them to access health products and services. Some of these are really personal. They're personal products, it's a personal topic. So you have to also think about the culture around that girl and the support system. Is this a topic that she's allowed to speak about. Is this a clinic that she should be seen coming to visit to test a service? So some of these things, it's important for you to take into account. And even in the case of like financial inclusion, for example, there's some communities we've gone to where women are not allowed to be a part of financial conversations. Decisions are made by their husbands, by the chiefs or village elders. So it's important to take all these things into account. The ethical concerns also being addressed to safeguard the community's well-being. And it's important to put safety measures in place for participants that are relevant to the communities that they're in and the barriers that they may face. So for implementation, it may involve trying out the solutions with a smaller group of people and getting their feedback and working together to make improvements. And this is something that we have found to be really important when it comes to implementation, because often when you think about the development sector and how they have gone into communities, they have often gone into the communities with a solution that's ready to pilot, to scale. But when we talk about inclusivity and collaboration, you need the buy-in from a lot of people in these communities for an intervention to be successful. And also for them to feel like they are part of this solution that's coming into the community and it's not foreign. And that has been really important in some of the work that we do. So it's important to create a feedback council. So that way you have people who are involved through and through from the beginning of the design process. So they've seen the inspiration, they've heard what it is that you want to do, they have come in the ideation process, and then you now have a different group of people, or even the same group of people, who provide feedback within the community when it comes to implementation. So that way they never feel like they're being left out, okay? So it's important to also establish clear and effective communication channels between this feedback council and the design team. And sometimes it's okay to even go an extra step and connect that feedback council with the implementing organization. So that way there's again more consistent involvement in the intervention that you're trying to launch within the community. And then there's also celebrating progress. Sometimes progress, the milestones that are made, can be really small, and sometimes it can be really big. Sometimes progress can be as simple as a woman standing up and speaking for her needs and her desires, or speaking to her aspirations. Sometimes it could be as simple as a man in a very rural community that's heavily patriarchal, who sees the value in him being a primary caregiver to his children and not looking at it as a woman's work. And then sometimes it could be an increased uptake of products and services. So whatever progress looks like for whatever community you're designing, especially when it's attached to traditions and culture, it's important to celebrate it and acknowledge everybody's presence and contribution to that particular intervention. So let me take a pause here, because I'd like us to speak about the collaborators that you meet in communities together with the case studies. And I don't know if there's some questions.
Yeah, Larrissa, there's been, the chat has been quite active, lots of questions been asked, and Luan has actually tried to answer some of the questions, which has helped keep keep the conversation going in the chat. So I think I'm trying to see which one hasn't been touched on. And I think the last one that was answered was so Nsikalelo asked, how long is your typical inspiration stage? As in, at what point do you say you've gathered enough data and community trust to move forward with your work? And then Luan said that trust building is a continuous process, and progress moves at the speed of trust, and we can gather some insight and inspiration within a week, but the trust building and testing has to come from there. So Larrissa, maybe you can build on that.
Yeah. Yes. So as Luan says, it really is dependent on the level of trust we're able to build within the community. And sometimes the inspiration phase can be scheduled in 1 week, and sometimes it can even take 3 weeks. There's also the fact that we need to consider how many communities we are interviewing. So sometimes you might find that you're working on a design brief and you're working across 3 different communities or 3 different user personas, right? So you cannot say that just because all these users are going to end up using the one thing and you've collected some insights from the one group that they speak for all 3. So there are these nuances that we have to take into consideration. So that's the number of user groups that we need to interview, and how much time it's actually taking to bring in to get the insights. So let me give you an example. There's a agricultural project that we did where the research was done across 3 weeks across 4 different counties. And we were looking at youth archetypes for agricultural farming. Why aren't young people, interested in farming? What can get them interested? And you find that the interests and the barriers to entry are all different in all these communities we interviewed, and we were able to get different insights and create personas that were rich, with insight in those 3 weeks. Then on the other hand, there's another project that we did where when we were running an inspiration phase with the county government, and we would go in for one meeting and we would not get what we need, and we would have to schedule another meeting and still not get what we need.
Yeah.
And it was such a laborious process of us trying to figure out why is it that we cannot get the insights that we need from this community. And in this case, the community was a county government, right? And it ended up leading to us understanding that the way we were coming in and interviewing and the processes that we were using were not feeling inclusive, right? So we had to redesign the entire method and process of how we were collecting the inspiration from the county government to something that was very artsy, very, the session had to be, it was 100% creative. And their level of involvement went from like 0 to 100, but that's a process that took us like 3 months. So it is really dependent on the timelines that you have put in, that you have for the design brief with a partner, and it is dependent on the number of users that you need to get information from.
Okay. Thanks, Larrissa. I think there's another question that builds on questions around just navigating the inspiration phase. It's from Jenny. In the inspiration phase, besides this primary data collection through interviews and a focus group, does IDEO.org also draw on other sources of data like existing secondary research on the topic or the community?
Absolutely. Yes, we do that. And in our studio, we actually have like project walls. So other than getting inspiration and data from the communities that we're working with, we also look for analogous inspiration from other sources. And the sources could be what has happened in another country, either for that sector, or looking at a principle that is similar to what it is that we are working with. And even if we're looking at a different sector. So for example, if we're looking at maybe like a value chain for food, for example, right? That doesn't mean that the analogous inspiration is only going to come from other organizations with very robust value chains. We might look at the value chain of Toyota. We might look at the value chain of Coca-Cola. So we do have those inspiration sessions that go hand in hand, because we also need to be able to borrow like some principles that sometimes can actually work for a very unique problem that we're trying to solve for.
Great. That's really useful at writing things down. So Larissa, you can move on to the next part of your topic, of your talk, just to highlight that we have about 20 minutes left. So yeah, if you can use your time so that we can have just a few minutes at the end for questions.
Okay, sure. Right, so when we talk about collaborators, this is actually the fun part of community engagement, because you're going into the field and then imagine you're trying to figure out who these players are. And there's a quote here from one of our service designers, and basically you have to go into the community and approach it with humility. So we've got all these different archetypes of collaborators, and they each possess unique characteristics and experiences that will influence their level of engagement and also how much buy-in you get from the community, right? So let's look at each of them. So we've got the community changers, and this most likely people who have consistently and positively engaged in community-based projects. And these are like community health volunteers, community youth leaders and peer mentors, community-based organization leaders, and village elders. These ones are, because of their deep interest and passion for their community, they're very easy to engage with. And they're the ones who will often be like your bestie in the fields, for lack of a better term, because they'll be able to let you know exactly how you need to navigate with a particular end user, or maybe a government office, if it's cultural aspects that you need to think about. So they know the homesteads that you need to go and visit. They know everything about their communities, and people actually trust them. So it's important to identify who this person is, and more often they can make your work very easy. Then we've got the authority figure. These are the people who are connected to the leadership of a community, and typically they tend to be the gatekeepers. So they can be local political or religious authorities, village chiefs, imams, senior staff at a district office. In some instances, when you're doing some community work, especially when it has to do with health, you have to go through an authority figure. And the earlier, the better. It's important to engage with them, because these are the people who can come in and end up telling, when you're halfway through your project and they tell you, by the way, you're not going to go ahead with this pilot, or this program has been canceled, it's been blacklisted, and you cannot come back to my community. So it's very important to figure out, when, depending on the type of work and the sector that you're working on for a particular design brief, who's the authority figure. Then we've got the determined survivor. These collaborators are sometimes very key in the work that you're doing, and they're the ones who are living with disabilities, refugees or displaced populations. They're the ethnic minorities or adolescent girls and young women, and individuals facing gender discrimination. So as much as we have the wider community that we look at, and the wider community is often like the support system or the gatekeepers, these determined survivors are often the ones who are actually going to be engaging one-on-one with a particular intervention. So it's important to also find them and have their voice in the process. Then we've got the wary optimist. These ones can be very tricky to navigate, because they're the community members who have been tirelessly engaged in repeated interactions with NGOs and projects. So they're community health volunteers, community-based org field teams, and religious leaders. The level of apathy that the wary optimist may have can sometimes be a huge barrier to entry, because they will approach you with an attitude of, I know what you're here to do. I know what you're selling, and you're not even going to be here long enough. And this community does not matter to you other than the money that you're getting for this project, so whatever. So it's important that when you're engaging with them, because at the same time, they are also like a community gatekeeper or the one who's going to like make your work very easy for you. So it's important to also like change their attitude towards the work that you are doing. So for these guys, it's important to include them in the process of everything and really distill down the work that you're trying to do in the community, because then they will be able to see a little bit of themselves, and maybe you'll be able to ignite like that faith that they had when they first started doing this work. Then you've got the opportunity spotter. These are the community members who look to make extra money. So a young graduate seeking their first job or looking to improve their resume, or someone looking for a career shift. These guys are often, because of how green they are very, very quick. So they can end up doing recruitment for you for participants, or they can end up giving you really cool ideas on how to engage with communities in a meaningful way that they themselves have never experienced when they were like the determined survivor, right? So to work with them, you need to be able to align with them on like the timelines, your project related activities. You need to see them as an extension of a member of your team and the delivery team, so to speak. So let's look at some of the case studies to see how community engagement has come into play. The first one is from our healthcare portfolio. And this is a campaign, a communication campaign that was labeled Nyathi and Mwando, A Child is Wealth. And we ran it with the Siaya County government, and we were working to help the community of primary caregivers understand the importance of the first 1,000 days of life and the importance of responsive caregiving. It was in this campaign where we needed to work with the collaborator, for example, like the county government. These are the people who were gatekeeping the process. And then we were also working with a very, very difficult end user who we needed to convert to the belief of responsive caregiving, and that was the male caregiver. It was a program that went on for about 3 years. So we did have a lot of time, going back to the question of inspiration, we did have a lot of time to keep going back to the drawing board to get the message just right for it to be able to resonate with the male caregivers, with the female caregivers and the county governments and the hospitals and the schools that we were working with, because it was multi-sectoral and we needed to work with the entire, like all the engagement touch points of the child. The next one is Adolescent 360. This case study is interesting because, excuse me, this is where we see the difference of the different collaborators and how they manifest in different communities. So just because you've worked with community health volunteers in one community, that does not mean that they represent how they are perceived across other communities that you work with. So we needed to increase adolescent contraceptive use in Ethiopia, Tanzania, and Nigeria. And the program was designed to ensure young people can be equal partners in the design and delivery of these solutions. So in Nigeria, what was important was designing safe spaces and girls-only clinics and opt-in counseling. And all this was delivered by trained nurses to help the girls navigate their big questions. And this was so important because in these communities, we found that a lot of the girls who did not go to take up any of these health products and services is because they did not want to be seen by a male doctor, and they also did not want to see community health workers who the level of trust was very low. In comparison to Ethiopia, where the level of trust for the community health worker was pretty high, so we were able to design a service that could scale through that particular community health system. And we were able to address harmful gender norms by engaging young couples in counseling that links financial planning with family planning. And in Ethiopia, it's actually been one of the most successful programs to date. For Tanzania, they wanted, what the community craved was a peer-led counseling program. So in this case, we did not engage a high number of community health workers, because the girls wanted to talk to their own age mates and they wanted to verify information with them and learn something new. So, and they were able to connect over shared interests so people don't feel alone in their thought process of what do I need, what is right, what is wrong. And then for agriculture, there's this really cool digital savings tool that we worked on in 2017 that puts education within reach. So a lot of farmers were not able to pay their fees on time because, of course, when money comes in, it comes in cyclically, and school fees have, you know, particular dates that you have to pay by, right? So to be able to empower the farmers with the savings tool, what we did was create a concept where they were able, when the money comes in, a little bit goes into a pouch, right? So they were able to save for the school fees. So by the time that the school fees came round, they already had the money to pay for it, and their kids were not out of school because, let's say, the season it's a bit of a dry season. And then for civic matters, I think this is very optimal with the climate that we're in. When it comes to, yes, Naila?
I just want to remind you, we have about 10 minutes left in total.
Okay, almost done. Yeah. So the case study when it comes to civic matters is addressing barriers to digital identity adoption in Tanzania. Now, this one we worked with IDEO for development, and we thought that we would find a barrier to entry in taking up a digital ID system. But to the contrary, the community was actually very open to getting national their national IDs, and for it being digital, there was no like perceived notion of it being something dangerous, which is something that we had uncovered in Kenya. People were very resistant to having a digital ID system. So the research led to the creation of an experience map that helped the partner understand the pain points along a user's journey to actually optimize obtaining and utilizing the national ID. So it wasn't an issue of like data protection or just not wanting a digital national ID. It was just about how do I apply for my ID? How do I get it? And then when do I need to use it, that they found really convenient. I think let me stop there so we can have some time for questions. I can see it's 1:52. And some of these case studies are in the playbook, so you should be able to read them in your own time. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Larrissa. I was taking some notes. I think we can open the floor to questions. If you want to raise your hand, then you can ask your question directly. Let's see. Oh, Colin?
Yeah, hi, thanks. Thank you for that interesting presentation. I do love the archetypes. My question is more around the initial engagement phase. You spoke about building trust, which is not a small feat. Straight away, I think of myself as a white male in Africa. So my one question, I guess, is just how much of a role in your experience has race in that respect played a role in that trust building process? And also typically, how would you design that trust building process, that interactive? Is it something that you integrate into the data collection, into the empathy phase, or would you typically assess that on the go and feel it out and move forward from stage to stage as an trust feels enough? I hope that question makes sense.
It does make sense, and I really like your question, Colin, because like I said in the beginning, we have a team of multidisciplinary designers, right? So we have designers in the US and here in Kenya. And in some instances, I remember at the beginning, before we even thought about community engagement or co-design, we saw how if we had a US designer, so a white designer who goes to the field and does the research, you find that the dynamic of the participants change, and the information that they're giving you can sometimes be skewed towards what they think the person wants to hear. Even if this US-based designer is just listening in, you find that even when they respond, they're responding and waiting to get some form of validation from them. So we notice that that does actually affect the attitude and also their own self-perception, right? So if you're responding to questions in a way that you think this person is interested of hearing how you respond to it, as opposed to what your actual lived experience is, it really does skew the information. So we tend to make sure that the design research that we do in Kenya, for example, has Kiswahili speakers. And sometimes going into a community that is very heavy on the local language, we will train somebody from that community to be able to do the design research for us. And we won't go into the room. Because again, now there's the US-based designers, but there's also us who they can see, oh, these people are coming from the city. I need more money. I need to be able to get more money, right? Then the next question about recruitment, everything okay? Can you all hear me?
Yes,
Yeah.
go
I think
ahead.
it's
Larrissa,
Jenny.
we're
Okay,
listening.
it's Jenny's connection. Okay, so when it comes to the recruitment and building of trust, before the designers would go to the field, recruit immediately, and carry out the interview. But now what we've done is that we work with community engagement coordinators who actually go into the field and they acclimatize maybe just a few days. It doesn't need a lot of time. And while they're doing that recruitment, they're also educating the community that we're going to engage with on the work that needs to be done. And so that is when you start building trust. So by the time the design researchers go into the field, they already have a familiar face and they already know what it is that is required of them. We've gotten the necessary permission. So some people have accepted us to go into their homes or even to observe them. So it's all about just being thoughtful about making the participant the most comfortable. It's not about you, it's not about your comfort. It's about them being so comfortable in their lived experience, so they're authentic and honest in the information that they give you.
Absolutely. Larrissa, I absolutely love that last line. And I think I'm going to stop us there because all of us have follow-on questions over and above that, because I want to ask about what if they're not comfortable with their local people and they actually want to open up to someone who they're never going to see again. So for our next one, I think that's where we can start. But I'd just like to say, Larrissa, thank you very much. I think we're all going to have our nighttime reading Community Playbook and your case studies. We will be all digesting that. Just thank you very much for your insights, for your wisdom. We are all going to be learning from that. And Jenny, I think, can we have Larrissa back again? We all need a little bit more time with her. But I'll hand back over to Jenny because she just has a few announcements before we all go.
Thanks. Jenny, before you go, let me just say that as you're going through the Community Playbook, we have our contact details on it. So you can just send us an email, let us know that you are participating in this particular session in case you have any additional questions. And thanks, everyone.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Am I muted, unmuted? Just make sure. No, you can all hear me. Okay. So thank you so much, Larrissa. I think this was absolutely wonderful. And I think, yeah, it would be great if we can continue the conversation on our LinkedIn group. To find another time together on this topic is difficult, but let's keep the conversation going. And so here, I'm going to quickly tell you, most of you here, I think, know about the African Collaboration Network and you're not new to it. But just to briefly say, this is a growing ecosystem of organizations that are all interested in building capacity and knowledge in design thinking in Africa, and also drawing from the practitioner community as we are today from IDEO.org. And then to say it was seeded in October 22 during the Decon Festival in Cape Town. It's facilitated by the Hasso-Plattner D-School Africa at UCT, and we have funding from the Hasso-Plattner Foundation. But really, it is a co-created, co-hosted initiative, and everyone is invited to join. The purpose of the network is really to convene and nurture an African network and community of practice of like-minded institutions of learning and development, and with a focus, who are focused on design thinking, looking especially at its application in diverse African contexts, with the purpose of collaborating so that we can share ideas and resources, build knowledge, and build capacity in design thinking on the continent. And particularly interested in it being responsive and adapted to local contexts. And with that, being able to contribute leadership and innovation in the design thinking field from a global South perspective. So just to say, if you'd like to connect and ways to engage is, I'm going to, actually, Nyla, if you're able to, while I'm speaking, please drop those links in the chat that I've shared with you today on email. And then so you can join these online meetups to know about them. Please subscribe to our newsletter. We've also previously shared resources like this Community Engagement Playbook in the newsletter. So there's lots of great stuff to connect with there. If you have any resources to share, really, please be in touch with me. There is my email address. Join the LinkedIn group to continue the conversation. Share what's going on in your organization, any opportunities that you have, any questions that you have. Please, the space is there. And then we also have a directory where you can register so we know who you are and what you're doing, what your interests are, what you might have to offer to this network, what you need from the network. And when you complete that directory, you get access to the Google Sheet. So you can look and connect with others. The contact details are there. You can see what others are interested in, and maybe there's someone who can meet your need, or you've got something to offer to meet someone else's need. So it's quite a rudimentary Excel sheet at the moment, but it's really valuable as a starting point for us. And then we also have this knowledge hub, which is on Google Drive, where resources like this playbook and anything else that you have to share. We've got a human-centered design guide for Africa in there, and we really want to build up this library of resources so that we can all use Africa-generated resources in our teaching and learning. So yeah, really bringing and centering the design thinking conversation in our context so that we don't have to rely so much on Global North resources. So please get in touch with me. There's my email address, and I look forward to hearing from anybody. So thank you so much to everyone for joining. Larrissa, thank you so much. What you've shared today has been so rich and valuable. And yeah, just thanks to each one of you for being here. Nyla, thank you so much for hosting and moderating the conversation so beautifully. To everyone's engaging questions, it's been fabulous. I'm still here. Room is open. If anyone wants to still stay and connect and discuss, you're welcome. But Larrissa, I know if you needed to leave, that's also okay. I'll be here.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
That my